What's up, guys? It is DEFCON Inc., and I'm here today joined by a very special guest, the current best Lost Box player in North America, top 8, the largest tournament in North America ever. This is Vic. Vic, say hi to the people.
Hi, happy to be on. We have a bit of history. I used to play in Chicago.
Yeah, it's funny. Vic and I have actually known each other for a pretty long time, and I'm really happy to see his growth and success as a player. I think he came up to me like round 7, and we just were chopping it up. And he goes, "Yeah, I'm 7-0." I'm like, "Oh, nice." Yeah, at the time I was like I don't know, like 303 or something silly. So I was like, man, Vic, keep killing in. I remember you ended the day 9-0, and we were all so happy for you. It's just a huge feat at a tournament like this.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the first and only time I've ever 9-0. Hopefully not the last, but it definitely could be. It's very difficult to do.
It is extremely difficult to do. I know the only other person that's gone like 9-0 that I know personally is Jeremy Gamilla, who's another Chicago person.
Yeah.
And now you at like this tournament, and it's incredibly impressive. You guys both made top 8. At their respective tournaments that you did so it's a huge feat, huge accomplishment. Really happy for both of you guys.
Thank
It
you.
just shows like the killers that are come out of Chicago.
Chicago's really tough. Very competitive scene.
And looking at your list, I wanted to talk about the list before we got into the matchups. So the deck list is gonna be right here in front of you, and it looks like almost normal Lost Box, but there are a couple of cool inclusions in here. So you do have the Luminion. I know you and I have talked about the Luminion in the past, and we're both a huge fan of it. What drove you to play Luminion over just another like Nest Ball or something like that?
Yeah, so actually running up to the event, I was testing one gear in that Luminion slot, and then the Ultra Ball would be Nest Ball, obviously. And it was fine. Gear is actually pretty good in the late game after you get hit with an Iono, and especially if you pal padded stuff back, it was okay. But I was testing the night before with Andrew Martin in our Airbnb, and basically we were testing a pseudo quasi mirror match. He was playing Turbo Kyogre, I was playing this list without the Luminion with the one gear, and it just came down to who bricked over and over again, like 7, 8 matches in a row. One of us would brick, one of us wouldn't, and that would just be the determiner in who won the game. And after that happened that many times, I just was like, I'm putting Luminion back in the deck. I had it before. I was a little bit worried coming up to the tournament that it wouldn't be good because Ultra Ball feels bad if you get Ionoed into it. But it was definitely the correct decision. It helped me in at least half of my matches. It is super good, way more consistent than Pokegear, especially turn 1. And just playing more copies of Chorus is never a bad thing, really.
Did you ever regret not playing more copies of Ultra Ball, or maybe like another way of finding Luminion, or did you feel like the one was good enough?
I think there is definitely a debate between 1 and 2. 0 is definitely not correct, and 3 is definitely way too many. I could see a second Ultra Ball in here somewhere, but it is really tough to fit. You definitely don't want to go under 2 Nest Ball. You could maybe cut the Artisan, but at that point, you have less vacuum targets, so it's really a hard trade-off. I think 1 was enough. I don't think I would change it, but I could definitely see an argument for having 2.
I know that we had spoken about kind of a similar deck with the Aerodactyl, where
Yeah,
we had played
yeah,
like Aerodactyl and Luminion. Funnily enough,
right.
we like I like messaged you because we had played almost the same exact 60 into like random cups one weekend
Yeah,
without speaking to each other, and yeah, we both had like Aerodactyl and Luminion in our decks. And
yeah. I
I
was
was a
thinking about
fan of
playing
the double
Aerodactyl as
Ultra
well.
Ball. I was
Yeah,
also gonna put Ultra Ball and like the Aerodactyl package. I just kind of like wussed out at the last second. I was like, there's no way this card's that good.
if you play Aerodactyl, you definitely need 2, right? Because
Oh,
otherwise
for
you
sure.
can't get the V Star consistently because you can't force Seal Stone for the V Star without using the V Star ability up. So you definitely need 2 if you play Aerodactyl. It's a little like more situational when you're not playing the Aerodactyl, and I think the Aerodactyl actually does have some merit. It's definitely on my radar for Worlds too. But this ends up being like similar to that without the Aerodactyl essentially.
Yeah, I was a big fan of like Luminion and the Aerodactyl, but I think the appeal of Lost Box is that once you kind of play it, it's tough to pick up other decks because you just feel how powerful the deck is.
It is, yeah, it is very powerful. If you go back to my history this season, out of my 7 major events, I played Comfy to 6 of them. So,
What was
and
the other
it's
one?
not. I played Rapid Strike Intel to Portland, and I didn't do that well. I was 1 win away from day 2, but I didn't do great, but I didn't do terrible.
Yeah, I mean, did you manage to get some points at least?
Yeah, I got
Okay,
30
there you go.
points with the Intel, and but every tournament pretty much I always consider other decks. I always test other decks, but I end up just defaulting to Lost Box because you don't really lose to anything. You're like 50-50, or at the very least, you're like 40-60 into pretty much everything. And you can outskill people, you can outluck people, you can outplay people. And I end up resorting back to it every time because of how powerful it is.
Yeah, I would agree. This deck does feel incredible, and I want to know what was the worst card in your deck this week or that weekend. Sorry.
Yeah. I think it's Artisan, but not because it's a bad card. It's just probably the worst one, if that makes sense. Either that or Drapion. I got value out of it round 1, and then round 12 I lost anyways, so it didn't really do much. And I never used it against Guardy, even though it can come up against Guardy. So yeah, Artisan or Drapion probably.
I feel the same way about Drapion. It's like there's not really a better card to play because I think the same thing happened to me. Is I played 50 rounds. I played against Zero Mew,
Yeah.
and I think round like 12 or something, I like killed a Guardy with Drapion. It was like the one time I used the whole event. Well, now take it back. I did use Drapion to kill a Duraludon.
Okay,
I mean,
interesting.
it came up twice, I guess.
Yeah, I thought about using it against the Arctura Umbreon and also Cyrus's Intel Rapid box, but it never felt like it was the right play. So it's hard to replace it, but it's also hard to keep it. It's really awkward.
Yeah, fun fact, if you use Sableye and Comfy, then Drapion kills Duraludon.
You are you
Yes,
spinning attacked with Comfy?
I spinning attack during the event.
That is very funny. Good to know.
I
Good to
attacked
know that could be relevant.
with Comfy as many times as I did Greninja that event.
That's crazy. I did not attack with Comfy once.
Well, yeah, that's why you did
good
so
to know
well.
that it's an option.
It is very funny. All right, well, let's get into these matchups. So you had a pretty, good matchup spread throughout the day. It's not like you played the same deck over and over again. You played a couple of different things. So round 1, you sit down and your opponent flips over Meloetta / Mew. How are you feeling going into that matchup? Pretty good, probably.
I haven't tested it too much. I think my opponent was a little bit newer to the Fusion Mew deck. I talked to him after, and he was used to DTE Mew, and he actually made a misplay game. I think game 1 or I think it was game 1 where he didn't do the damage math correctly and threw away a position where we were pretty even, if I remember correctly, because he thought he needed a tablet, but he didn't because he had 2 fusions attached to his Mew. I think if your opponent plays perfectly in the Fusion Mew matchup, it can be kind of awkward if they get the first attack off. And honestly, I still haven't tested the matchup enough to know for sure if it's better to go first or second, because it does feel kind of bad if they get the turn 1 Psychic Leap off into like a Comfy or something. Overall, it seemed pretty 50-50, maybe a little bit favored with the Drapion if they're playing perfectly, but if they're not, then you have the advantage for sure.
Okay, so you go, you're up 1-0, and then you hit mark round 2, and they're playing Arceus plus nothing. So was this just because they didn't have the variant uploaded, or was this that like quad Arceus deck I saw that was going around?
I honestly don't remember fully which order I hit Arc decks, but I do remember I hit basically 4 different Arc decks. I believe this one was Arc Arrow Klefki.
Oh,
no,
Lord.
sorry, not Klefki. It was Arc Arrow, just Arc Arrow, no Klefki.
Okay. No keys it's just like such a relief at that point. You're like,
yes.
Oh, okay, I get to play the game.
Yes, the keys are very annoying. Sometimes you can win by just going Raikou attach, but that's not always the case, depending on how good of a start that they have. And also, obviously, the Arrow can revenge knock out the Raikou. So it was no keys. It was just like Alakazam and whatnot. And yeah, if I'm remembering this one correctly, I believe that was round 2, not round 5, because it doesn't show on Pokestats which one is which. But this was a situation where I got off to a hot start round 1, was able to win off of that lead, and they were off to a slower start, maybe missed attached turn 1 if I remember correctly, something like that. I was just ahead. And then game 2, I was behind for most of it, and actually because game 1 had taken so long, my opponent was like, "Hey," they weren't trying to be mean or anything. They were just saying, "Hey, like I'm this far ahead. I think like if you don't have a win condition, maybe we should consider playing game 3." And I'm like, "No, I definitely do." And then I bossed up a Radiant Alakazam, and he was like, "Oh, that is definitely a win
That is
condition."
a win
And I won
condition.
game 2, and I won game 2 off of that, and lost mine.
Right, very
And
easily.
that's how I cleaned that one up.
Yeah, that's the another a great thing about Lost Box is that sometimes your opponent can play really well still throughout the entire game, and then you can still go, okay, well, I'm gonna attempt to checkmate you this way, and if they don't have the out in that moment, like it is what it is. If Lost Box gets 1 or 2 free attacks off, then the game is just over.
Yep.
All right, and then round 3, you hit single strike. I know personally, I really don't like playing against a single strike deck. I think it's a decently hard matchup with no grass tech, but you ended up taking him down. So how did this one go?
Yeah, the matchup is probably one of your worst meta matchups. I think it honestly might be worse than the Rapid Strike Intel matchup. I'm not sure. I'd have to play more games to know for sure, but definitely one of your worst ones. Game 1, I was able to win based off a turn 1 attack, either turn 1 or maybe it was a turn 2 going first, but I attacked first, obviously getting 2 prizes and kind of snowballed from there. And then game 2, it was actually a similar situation to the match I just played and I just talked about, where my opponent hit like 3 or 4 colorless energy off of T-Tar's single strike crush, and they had a couple left in the deck, so I kind of just waited and they kept attaching them to Archeops instead of just holding them into the deck, which let me win by bossing up either Serena or Lugia or something that had no energy attached to it.
Yeah, so it seems like that one of boss was pretty clutch on these.
Yes,
first
it happened.
couple
This is
rounds.
actually it happened again day 1 as well. It happened 3 times, but those were the 2 times that I can remember.
It's funny how like those random little niche scenarios will come up. Like, it will come up 0 times in playtesting, and then when you go to a real event, it's like, wow, this came up like 3 times in 5 rounds. Like, what is going on today?
The matches are sometimes just a little bit different in regionals. People are a little bit grindier. People will find any small percent, whereas in Tesla you might just scoop it up to save time and you go on to the next. So sometimes it just shows up like that.
All right, and then round 4, you hit Arc Giratina. That's Austin Ellis, who's actually another. I don't know if he's from Chicago land, but I know he's from the area because he does attend events over here. A super nice guy. And this is also like a kind of a hard matchup if they get ahead, if they just set up multiple arcs and they're just path judging you every turn. So this one can be kind of iffy, but you ended up taking the win against him.
Yeah, I don't fully remember. It was definitely a 2-0 because I was playing my normal speed, which is unfortunately not extremely fast. It's not usually fast enough to finish 3 games. It was 2-0, and I remember just attacking with Dragonite quick enough that it was enough to be overpowering, and I think Austin missed attachment or something in one of the games and was just off to a slower start, so I was able to clean up that way. Also, I think if I remember correctly, he played Spiritomb, and because he knew I played Lumineon, there was an opportunity to bench it or discard it, and I got value there off of Echoing Horn, and Spiritomb having only 60 HP definitely helps swing the prize trade in my favor. It's definitely not correct to bench Spiritomb against me, even though I play Lumineon, but Lumineon helped inadvertently that way by making my opponent think about benching it. Or, yeah.
So against this deck, use your prize map usually like, okay, well, I'm going to try to smack into Arc or kill Arc turn 1 with a Dragonite or, any 2 prize or Tina, or maybe the Flying Pikachu even if they put that V down. And you'll work your way around other VMAX and then try to horn up, with a Scovid or a Bidoof and try to take the last 2 prizes that way.
Yeah, I think you want to take as many prizes as possible on single prizers. So if they only give you 1, you probably want to take 2 by, Sableye Lost Mine and then Echoing Horn Lost Mine. If they give you 3, for example, you want to take 4 and just avoid the Vs in general. I think that is probably the best route. It's not usually likely that you can get 4 single prizers off, but it does happen sometimes if they have like a really bad hand or Yeah, basically that. Or they choose to bench the Spiritomb against you to maybe stop the Lumineon play from happening. Echoing Horn, I think, is super big in that matchup, and that's one of the tech cards I chose to play, and one of the more unique cards in my deck, because normally you would only play it if you play Kyogre. And I think against Arc decks, it helps a lot because you can Echoing Horn boss, or you can like a Dragonite to knock out a 2-prizer, for example. So that's also one route that you can take.
I think the Echoing Horn adds a lot of more win cons to your deck, which is really nice. It can. I think Echoing Horn's a good card against good players, and then like a really, really good card against like okay players. But generally,
Yeah, I
against like the
think.
really good players, it gives you like an additional win condition, or sometimes you can't always play around Horn depending on how your hands is transpired throughout the game.
Yep, you can't always play around it, and I think it generally just helps your win cons. It gives you some more outs to look for in the late game, especially against Arc decks. It also helps in the mirror if they're not respecting it. You can lock up their board and Sableye around. And I think the the reasoning behind Echoing Horn being a good card in Lost Box is that it's sometimes a terrible card and sometimes a game-winning card. And in a deck like Lost Box, where you get rid of resources and you burn them forever, it's actually okay to have one or two cards like that, where sometimes it's useless and sometimes it's game-winning, because a lot of the times you're allowed to burn it for free and you lose no value from doing so. And it's similar to Roxanne that some people were playing at NAIC, where it's really good sometimes, really bad other times. The difference, and why I like Echoing Horn more, is because when you see Roxanne off of a flower selecting, you don't know how much value that it's going to give you. You don't know whether you should take it or not, because you have no idea if it's going to brick them. Whereas Echoing Horn, depending on when you see it in the game, you can usually tell if it's going to matter for your game plan or not, and you can make a wise decision that way. So I think the Echoing Horn is really good. It's important not to have too many cards that clog your consistency, but having the one there definitely doesn't hurt you too much.
Yeah, I had when I was building my deck. My deck is almost feels like 56, maybe 57 cards the same. But I had played Roxanne at that event, and yeah, for me it was either Roxanne. I was able to either avoid flipping it off flower selectings and Colress's until the end of the game, because I think it is one of those cards that, like, if you flip it, it just goes most of the time.
Yeah.
But I think every time I played that card, I won the game. It was just ridiculous into every mirror. But you didn't end up playing any mirrors, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, no mirrors. Yeah, I was actually. That's one of the matchups that I'm the most confident in. Even though it's like theoretically a 50-50, I think Lumineon helps your consistency. I think I play the mirror pretty well. I think Echoing Horn has to be respected, and some players might assume you don't play it if they don't see the Kyogre. So I thought I would be good into mirror, and I was kind of hoping that I would hit mirror. Just kept avoiding it.
I know
and it turned out well, but it was kind of scary.
I've had the discussion with a couple of people, like Tyler Matthews and my buddy Andrew Nunez, about the Lumineon into like the Lost Box mirror. But I think the Lumineon actually probably makes you more favorite into the mirror, because it can sponge up, that Cramorant hit and then go back into the deck, and then every time you put it down, it's just another Colress. So chances are, even if both of you are drawing like okay, you're probably going to end up winning, just because you're able to see Colress more consistently.
Right. You can see the Colress more consistently, and then you can also seal stone more easily than they can. If they seal stone without Lumineon, they're kind of scared of potentially getting boss played on the last turn or not. Whereas you don't have to be afraid of that. So that's two like cards that are extremely good to have that you can grab with Lumineon that you normally would not be able to. So I think it does help. It definitely gives a couple of percentage points for you.
All right, well, if I see you at Worlds, remind me to give you some reverse comfies for your deck.
Okay, sounds good.
Just looking at them now.
Is it because they bend less, or is it just the fashion thing?
It's just shiny, man. You got reverse Sableye. I think you got a reverse Cramorant.
I don't have reverse Cram, but I changed to reverse Sableye because, well, we'll talk about this later. But I did get a game loss. We'll get around to it.
Okay. All right. So let's get through a couple of these a little quicker, so we can talk about more of the day 2 matchups. I think those are the ones people are probably more, interested in. So then round 5, another Arc deck. Is this? What variant is this?
It was Arc Dura, if I remember correctly, and this was the most high roll game I had. I even like apologized to my opponent mid game, because I just like turned one Dragonite into Judge into Rope to knock out Arc energy on the bench. It was gross, and I got lunch after it.
Yeah, that's it feels good when you win your game so fast you can like go do fun stuff on the side, you know. Check out the Pokemon
Yeah.
Center, go get some lunch, you know, talk some VGC players maybe or you know, Unite players. You're like, oh yeah, what are you guys doing? All right, and then round 6, colorless Lugia, kind of a scary matchup too. Snorlax is incredibly good into this deck.
Yeah, Snorlax is really annoying, but it is definitely better than Single Strike Lugia as a matchup because if you go turn 1 Dragonite, they don't really have a way to knock you out unless they find their belt, which is hard for them to do. So that matchup kind of went one game they bricked, and one game I went turn 1 Dragonite, and they didn't have a good response because they didn't find the belt.
Oh, how often would you say you got turn 1 Dragonite?
When I went for it, I think if I started comfy, it was like 50% or higher, and when I didn't start comfy, it was definitely like 30% or lower. But I didn't go for it every game. It just kind of depended on the situation. But it did happen a couple times for sure.
Yeah, that turn 1 Dragonite feels real good. It's like, oh, what can stop me now?
It's really good into the matchups that I hit, the Arcs and the Lugias. Yeah, for sure.
And then round 7, you hit Miraidon, which is pretty free as a matchup. So that must have felt pretty good. You're like, oh, I'm 6-0. I'll play against Miraidon. Nice.
It was. I was definitely favored, but I don't think it was that free. I think it's super free if you play Kyogre, but they had. But I didn't obviously, and I didn't have Aerodactyl either, and so it went to 3 games because they had Magnezone V, Magnezone V Star, and then they had the Charms, which were really annoying because if you attach Charms to like Miraidon or Raikou, mostly Miraidon, you don't really have any way to one-shot it anymore. So thankfully I played 3 vacuums, so I was able to get around that. But if you don't hit your vacuums at the right time and they play their like 1 Iono or whatever, it can get kind of awkward, and it did get awkward. I think I misplayed a little bit by benching Manaphy turn 1, game 1 or 2. One of the games I lost, I benched Manaphy turn 1, which is just kind of an easy 1 prize for them to grab with the Magnezone V. I think you should wait until turn 2 to bench it ideally, because then it just kind of makes it a little bit more awkward because they can't cleanly go for the knockout into the V-Star attack.
Yeah, that was in my matchup notes for Miraidon when I was writing him because one of the other locals around me wanted to play Turbo Lost Box. So I was sending the matchup notes, and that was one of my head. If you go first against Miraidon, you don't bench the Manaphy until turn 2.
Until they can actually threaten the V-Star attack. Yeah, agreed.
Okay, let's see. And then round 8, you play against the eventual champion of the tournament.
Right, yeah.
And this matchup is pretty bad. In my experience, I think I went like 3-0 versus it at the event. And it was mainly because I forced like my opponent to positions where they had to attack with the Inteleon, so you could take like that free 3 prizes. How did your experience against this matchup go?
So heading into the matchup, I thought I was like very unfavored, maybe like 30-70. And then after playing it both like twice, I think it's actually not that bad. It's like 40-60 maybe. You're probably still unfavored, but it's not awful. And the reason why is because you always have liberty to knock out the Remoraid turn 1 or turn 2 if you draw into like a hot start. So if you're going second, you can Greninja turn 1, and if you're going first, you can Greninja turn 2, and they will never be able to like stop you from doing that if you draw well. So that's kind of how the game went. Well, actually, I had a game 1 loss heading into this round because one of my Sableyes and my Forest Steelstone were curved more than my other cards. Like, they were really pringly, really bad compared to my other cards. I thought for a second they were giving me a round loss, which I was really sad about, but then they were like, no, it's a game loss. I'm like, okay, understandable. And then I went up to the table, knew the matchup already, and we were kind of joking a little bit about how maybe it's not that bad to have a game loss into a bad matchup. But I ended up winning anyways. The first game, which was game 2 of the set technically, I was able to knock out Remoraid turn 1, and then Cyrus went Remoraid again to set up the board because I think they said it was a misplay later, but it's really hard to play the game without Remoraid or Octillery with that deck. So they play the Remoraid again after I knock it out the first time, and then I went Echoing Horn, Sableye, knock out 2 Remoraid, and then I was at 3 prizes, and I had Raikou on the bench the whole time, which pretty much set me up for checkmate. because they don't play boss. So I just needed to find boss to win the game essentially because they had Inteleons on the bench. And then game 3, they went first, started Inteleon, attach pass, and I dunked them with Raikou.
Ooh. Yeah, that's rough. Yeah.
So I definitely got lucky in that matchup to 2-0 my opponent after having a game loss. Feels bad that I got the good luck in day 1 instead of day 2 in top 8, but sometimes that's just how the dice roll, how the cards draw.
I mean, hey, you started 11-0, right? I mean, the hotness has to wear off, a little bit throughout the day, I
Yes,
guess,
that's
right?
true. Yeah, that's valid.
And then round 9, you play against Michael Catron, and we saw his crazy deck of, it was like Arc, Pika, Umbreon with a Slacking, bunch of goodness. So how did this one feel kind of going into the matchup where, I mean, Arceus could really kind of throw whatever they wanted to their deck, and I'm sure, as the game unraveled, you just saw the mysteries of his deck. How did you approach this matchup knowing that you know pretty much nothing about it?
Yeah, I wasn't super sure what was in the deck. I had heard like rumors of things that were floating around, and I definitely saw stuff. I knew that there was Metacham, and I forgot that there was Metacham. Someone told me that there was Metacham, and then I misplayed. I almost lost game 1 because of it. I think it was game 1 that I almost lost because of it. I basically took game 1 with a massive lead because I went Raikou, turn 1, I believe, or either turn 1 or maybe I was first going maybe it was turn 2 going first, but I had the first attack of the game on a flying Pikachu. Then they went 180 with the Arc, and then I went Echoing Horn Boss to take 2 more off a second flying Pikachu, which was pretty lucky to have it like that. And then because my Raikou was at 180, they could have Yoga Looped me and then came back in the game that way. And I could have played around that if I just switch carded my Raikou, but I just forgot that they played Metacham, even though someone had told me, because it's not something you normally see in the Arc deck. And also, I don't think it's very good in the Arc deck. I think even Katron said that himself. So I almost lost game 1 from a throw, but I didn't. Got lucky there, got bailed out. And then game 2 was a similar situation to the 2 times that have happened before, where Katron was at a lead. I ended up having to boss Alakazam after they had Iono'd both himself and me and had a small hand. I bossed Alakazam, lost mine. They hit Switch, and then I hit Palpad, boss Alakazam again. They hit V-Guard on Alakazam. Then I was so far behind that at that point, I still did not win. I lost mine. They had Alakazam V-Guard. All they need to hit is 1 more energy to win the game. They drew for turn. Their hand is like 2 or 3 cards. They play Iono for 1 and whiffed, and then I was able to win that way.
Hey, you played your outs, man. If there's a sliver of hope, you got to go for it, right?
Based off how game 1 went against the deck and how it's still... Game 2 wasn't like clearly in their favor for a while. They needed to hit like certain things to be able to push their advantage. So it wasn't obvious that I should scoop that match. And basically by the time I figured that I could scoop, that there wasn't a high enough % chance to win the game, it wasn't clear that game 3 would finish, if I remember correctly. So sometimes you just gotta play to your small percentage outs, and yeah, that was pretty much it. And I ended the day 9-0.
Yeah, so must have been felt pretty good, going to dinner, 9-0 champ, ordering what'd you get for dinner that night?
I believe we ran over to Brassica, which I ate a couple times that weekend. It's like Mediterranean. It's really good. It's my favorite place in Columbus for sure. It's like healthy, tasty, fast, and open.
And I bet you that food tasted extra good when you were 9-0, huh?
It did taste good, but I talked a little bit about this on the Lake of Rage podcast. I actually felt I felt good and bad at the same time, where there's a lot of pressure on you if you're 9-0. And I think it kind of gets to me sometimes. It definitely got to me a little bit. Didn't sleep super well that night. It felt good, especially like winning that 9th match. I felt super satisfied and I cheered for sure. But yeah, the pressure's on. The stakes are high at that point.
Well, thankfully, going to the second day, you do have a pretty big lead compared to everyone else in the room. So, you only need to get a couple more wins. If you go into the day 2, 6-2-1, it's like, all right, I need the miracle run here. I need to win, basically 5 out of my 6 and maybe tie the last one. But at 27 points, you're like, okay, I just get like 3 wins, and then we can lock up this top 8, especially at the biggest event ever, which is so crazy.
That is true, but I will counter by saying you have the best chance to go top 8, which is great, but it does if you by chance miss, it almost feels like embarrassing. And I don't think it should be embarrassing. I would never like hate on someone for that or call them out for that. But the pressure's on. If you miss, you feel like you let yourself down almost.
It's right.
Without...
You didn't miss. You are him, and you made the top 8.
I did, yeah.
And you were the only Lost Box player to do so. You grinded through those 15 rounds, and you made top 8 at the largest tournament of all time.
Thank you. Yes, it did feel good making top 8, that's for sure.
And so then moving into day 2, you hit Gardevoir round 1. So this is the first Gardevoir you hit throughout the entire tournament. That's going to be around 10 and 11. So we'll kind of combine them. What are your thoughts on the Guardian matchup overall? Are you one of the people who are in the camp of this matchup's pretty favorable, or this matchup's like more of a 50-50 now?
It's definitely favored for Lost Box, depending on what cards they run. I think generally it's 55 favored for Lost Box. If they play like 2 collapsed, 1 penny, then maybe it starts to get into unfavored territory, but you don't really see that. At most, you see 2 collapsed or 1 penny. Sorry.
Okay.
1 penny, 1 collapsed. So at that point, it's at least 50-50, if not slightly favored.
Yeah, unless they're teching 3 to 4 cards for Lost Box,
Right.
I would agree. I'm in the camp of I think this matchup is very favored. Not very favored, but it's definitely in your favor. And,
Right.
It shows you smacked up round 10 opponent, smacked up round 11 opponent, and we get to the unfortunate round 12 of the second Fusion Mew, your first loss of the tournament. So walk me through what happened this round.
Yeah, game 1, I went first, and then they got the turn 1 attack off. I believe it was just a Psychic Leap, not a Melodious Echo. And the game I had a position where I could have won if I was able to hit attack every turn from that point onwards. But there was just one Judge or Iono that stuck, and I whiffed attack for a turn or two, which was just too much, and I fell too far behind. Game 2, I actually chose to go second because it felt pretty bad, game 1, having gone first. I'm still not sure which one is correct, but I chose to go second, and I was able to Greninja 99. I was able to go down to 4 prizes after turn 1 Drapion or Raikou, I forget which. So I just needed to clean up 2 more Genesects for game. So I Greninja 90-90. They kept taking prizes every turn, as Mew does. Then I had another situation where I could Greninja again. But basically they hit Switch Cart on one of their Genesects, which made it awkward because now they're at 90-60, so I can't Sableye for game. I have to Greninja Sableye for game. And then I Greninja, and then I put the damage on one Genesect and then an undamaged Genesect, which was just like plain out incorrect. I was just kind of thinking too hard about Collapse Stadium, which they didn't even play, and Fusion Mew doesn't normally play. If I just Shuriken the 2 damaged Genesects, then I could have cleaned up with Sableye the next turn instead of needing 2 more attacks, which eventually did me in because I did whiff attack for 1 turn. So I could have tied that match. Unfortunately lost, but ended up being okay.
Okay, so then, funnily enough, you hit probably the most lopsided matchup in Standard.
Yeah.
It's for your round 13, which is the round that qualifies you for top 8.
Yes. So I just needed 1 more win to lock myself up for top 8 because that would be 12 wins, so I'd be 36, which is pretty guaranteed. Hit Alex Szymanski. He was not happy to see me. I was happy to see him.
Yeah,
I was hoping all day to hit Alex after hearing that he had done well day 1. Finally, it happened after I played against way too much of the upper bracket, and eventually I got paired to him. And yeah, 2 of the games, it went pretty much how you expect it to go. Lost Box can take multiple prizes multiple times, whereas United Wings usually can't. They can maybe take 2 prizes once if you're forced to bench Lumineon, but that's it. So you win pretty handily unless you brick for multiple turns. I actually did lose a game though, which Alex was happy about because I started Lone Greninja pass and he donked me.
Ooh, well, I mean, at least that game went by quick, so you're able to, finish up that game three. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
probably like the most lopsided matchup in standard. If there's another one, I have yet to see it.
I think it's like 10% chance for them to win. Yeah, it's pretty
And yeah, that
lopsided.
10% is probably just getting donked, or you going. I don't even know. Yeah, like manaphy attach pass, like go.
Yep, yep.
All right, so you're around 13. You're locked for top 8. What is your first thought after you're signing that match?
It felt good. Yeah, the pressure was definitely relieved. I kept thinking, like overthinking the different scenarios of how day two could have went after I went home, after I went to the Airbnb, after day one, where I was like, okay, if I whiff top eight, that would be a massive failure, massive disappointment. That would make me sad. If I make top eight, I would feel pretty good. Even if I lose in top eight, I think overall the event would have been a success. And yeah, I made top eight, so a lot of relief and a lot of pressure was off my shoulders, especially because I played pretty terrible day two, rounds 10 and 11. I played awful, so I was thankful to have been bailed out and to make it regardless.
Yeah, for a tournament run this insane, I think a little bit is that little luck factor where,
Oh, for
a
sure.
couple of times you get bailed out here by, the draw of a card or, a lucky top deck or like a really good matchup. And it almost feels like the skill of the average to like, oh, even great player now, everyone knows what they're doing. Like we're in the internet era, everyone has
Yeah.
access to, the best lists and coaching and articles from all the top players. So it's really not common to find people misplaying often, especially top level players.
Nope.
So,
Not major errors for sure.
so any little bit of sliver of luck, Lady Luck wants to put you in her good graces. You just got to be happy with it.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think it's after having gone 9-0 day one, I think it's basically impossible to go 9-0 without being lucky in some regard. You have to be either above average luck or your deck building skill has to be so insane that like you made this control deck that no one thought of and it's like broken for the meta. And that's like basically the only two ways that you can go 9-0.
You know that Fort Minor song where it's like 10% luck,
Yeah,
20%
yeah.
skill? So what a percentage of luck and skill do you think it is?
Um
And what percentage is ripping chorus off the top? No, I'm just kidding. You don't
it
have to quantify that. It
it's
was a
it's
joke.
it's hard to say. I think I had the skill to take advantage of the good luck that I had, especially day one and day two. It's like half and half this event.
Nah, there's
Yeah,
no way the luck's that high. You're cracked. I would say maybe it's like 15% at the most, or it's like, you got a couple of lucky little things happen here and there, but
Do you
even
know what happened? Do you know what happened to me on my stream game round 10?
what happened against Angus Johnson. Oh, yeah, because, you were 9-0, so they had to put you on the stream.
They put me on stream once, and that was round 10, and I feel bad for him. I don't want to put him on blast or anything. He is a regional champion from Australia, so he has been on stream before, but he's never been on a big stream, is what he was telling me when we were walking up to the stage.
Okay.
And I think it got to him a little bit because also the white noise was so loud. It was louder than I had ever heard at regionals in the past, probably because of the big stage and whatnot. White noise was terrible. Game one, we played pretty normally. I won. I had the lead. He had a bad start and didn't play that well, I think. And then game two, I played pretty terribly my last couple turns and kind of almost threw the game. I got to a situation where I got Iono to like 2. I had to hit like Super Rod Mirage Gate to win because I only had 1 energy in deck. I only hit Mirage Gate. I played down the Mirage Gate knowing pretty sure that I had not enough energy in deck, but I played it anyways because there was like no point. This was the last turn that I had. So I played it down and he scooped up his cards instantly before I could even check for how many energy.
Oh.
Yeah. I felt really bad, but I couldn't even stop him. I didn't even know
I mean,
what was happening.
it's like we take those, but yeah, it does feel
Yeah.
like a little like grimy kind of because it's like, I'm gonna just
Yeah.
play this for the fun, and then your opponent picks the cards up. It definitely happens. Oh
It
no.
was so it could have easily been a tie, and that was definitely part of the luck factor going in my advantage as well. Shout out to Angus if he's listening. He was a really nice opponent, one of my nicest opponents. I feel bad for him, but he was also 8-1 and just had a terrible day two, like 1-5 after that, I think. or 1-4.
Yeah. Sometimes you have that hot start, and then the day two is not super favored. But I mean, it happens. We can't all have
Yeah,
like a nasty day two run, right? I mean,
I will say to to Angus or anyone that's listening that's friends with him or anything like that, I can totally relate because my first stream game when I was streamed like 2 years ago at Knoxville regionals with Nag Quag Quag Nag, I also threw on stream completely. Like I had basically checkmate and I threw it away. So it happens. It's tough. I totally relate.
it's all right. Sometimes the big lights do get to you, and the best thing you could do is learn from your mistake. I think that in him doing that, he'll realize. Always make sure your opponent has it. Make sure they always play it out, because same thing happens is maybe your opponent needs like a 2-card combo to win the game. They play one, and then they play a draw support to try to find the other one. Wait for them to have it. Don't just scoop up the game preemptively.
Yeah.
All right, so then round 14, you get paired against Katron again. Is this like a strategic tie or is this a natural tie?
We just ID'd. I wasn't sure that like 36 was almost guaranteed a lock, but we just tied it up to make sure. I think there was a situation where I wanted to maybe play it out to try and win against Katron because his deck was kind of annoying for me to face off. But I decided just to lock it up to be safe, to put myself at that 37.
And then round 15, you play against eventual top 8 competitor. Actually, you played against, 3 top 8 placers? Rowan.
So Cyrus, Ian, Michael, Rowan.
4.
Yeah.
Wow. 4 of your opponents made top 8, the largest event ever. That is a crazy stat.
Yeah, I think when you're 9-0, eventually you run out of players, so you just kind of have to play against everyone at the top tables. But yeah, so Ian, Rob, I just scooped instantly because I conceded, and it was because I estimated after getting some advice on this, we guessed that if I conceded to Ian, he would be first and I would be second, which would mean that I wouldn't have to play against him until top 2. And the reason why I did that was because the Arc Dura matchup with the 3 Lost City isn't great, and he was probably one of the best, if not the best pilot of the multiple people playing like a Arc 3 Lost City variant in top 8. So I thought it would be beneficial to avoid him in the end, and that ended up working out pretty okay. It didn't end up going exactly that way because I was seeded 3rd, and I was supposed to play against Rowan, which was great. And when this happened, I was like, I'm a genius. I hit the best matchup. I avoided Ian until at least top 4. And the thing that screwed it up was that the second seed got DQ'd, and that's like another topic entirely. But they did get DQ'd, and the way they resolved it was that they moved everyone up, and then they bumped up 9th seed to 8th, which put me up against Cyrus instead for top 8.
Yeah, which definitely, you're feeling great going into it, and then Urshifu, I mean, you were able to beat Cyrus earlier in Swiss, so the matchup against them isn't impossible while it is hard. So how are you feeling going into the top 8 matchup?
I was pretty sad that I wasn't playing against Guardy, but I was like, okay, I 2-0'd them before. This time I have 3 games to work with. Surely, like, I can get something going. Maybe at least take a game and see where to go from there. Unfortunately, as fast as I 2-0'd Cyrus round 8, I got 0-2'd in return.
Oof.
I started Raikou, didn't even hit like Cram Attack turn 1. So basically game 1, I went second, lost the coin flip if I remember correctly. Then they started Remoraid, and they had like Intel Urshi on bench or something like that, but no second Remoraid on bench. So all I needed to do was hit Cram turn 1. I started Raikou, and I hit Colress actually, which is usually pretty guaranteed you can hit Cram after that. But I just Colressed and fleet-footed into like the worst cards, so I couldn't Cram that turn, and it kind of snowballed from there where they were able to just knock out the Raikou. And then game 2, I just also bricked for like 2 turns and was not able to get that turn 1 Greninja, or turn 2 Greninja going first, which is like the key to knocking out their Remoraids and stifling their setup. So just got 0-2'd pretty quickly, and that was my tournament.
Yeah, the one unfortunate thing about Lost Box into Urshi is none of your, I guess the normal list, right, without Lumineon, is none of your V Pokemon feel particularly great to put down because Drapion
Mm-hmm.
dies to Urshi, Raikou dies to Urshi, and then
Mm-hmm.
Dragonite just accelerates their win con. So it's like, what do I do?
Yep. And then the Drapion, you can get value out of it sometimes because it can attack for free, but that 190 is like not a great damage number. Like it doesn't really ever feel super relevant. So everything feels kind of bad, except maybe like Raikou knocking out an Inteleon VMAX, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that feels like the best. Whenever you get that, you're like, oh, value city. But
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
if there was a belt in here somewhere, I could see the matchup being improved a little bit more. I was thinking about playing like Raihan choice belt into the event, but I ended up going with the Roxanne. I mean, I think it ended up being better anyways. I don't think belt's like very good in this deck. Like,
I really do think the main way to win the matchup is just go for Remoraid turn 1. And then if you get there, hope that they can't play the game, which they can't most of the time. And then that's pretty much your best win con.
Yeah, if you can get that 90-90, kill Remoraid, 90 into the Urshifu, it sets up, the perfect number with Dragonite, and then it makes it so that they're almost forced to attack with Inteleon. If you get those 4 prizes, like, the game is basically over.
Yeah. The majority of games, they need Octillery to pull off a Yoga Loop combo, until it's like maybe they can do it late in the game, but sometimes by that point it's too late. They need it pretty much always early, and I think that's your like main win condition. So it comes down to if you can Greninja immediately or not.
Yeah, if they're drawn so well that they can Yoga Loop you without Octillery, like, hey man, you were gonna win anyway. You got it.
Yeah. And I do want to say though that Cyrus's build of the Urshi is a little bit more consistent, so you are better as a Lost Box than the previous format Urshi that we've seen, because Cyrus chose to cut both Drapions, which is a questionable decision, but it is very good into Lost Box to be able to play that third Seal Stone.
Yeah, the no Drapion, I mean, Mew wasn't that popular going into the event, so I could definitely see the justification for it, and I don't know if I saw their, like, a Twitter post with them detailing their matchups, but I would be curious to see how many Mews they did end up playing against.
They hit 0 Lugias and 0 Mews.
Oh, that's how you win a NAIC 2023 with Urshifu. Yeah, pretty much.
I was testing that deck into NAIC actually, and it just was not consistent enough against Guardy because I was still playing the double Drapion. But turns out you do not need that card if you don't hit Mew. And I think that was a pretty fair meta call, to be honest, because Mew ended up being not that good. But I'm glad that I didn't play it because I did hit 2 Mews and 2 Lugias, so I'm glad I went with the deck that I did.
All right, so do you have any closing thoughts on Lost Box Into the Worlds tournament, or any, final send-off thoughts?
For Worlds, this is definitely on the top of my radar still. I've played Comfy so many events that it's the most comfortable deck for me, and it's not like it's not a powerful deck. It certainly is. You probably do need to make some changes somewhere where I don't know yet. You could cut maybe Drapion if you're feeling risky and not wanting to hit Mews or not expecting to hit Mews. You can cut maybe Third Vacuum and Artisan, but those cards felt really good throughout the tournament as well. So it's hard to say. I think there are techs you can play to make your Arc and your Urshi matchup a little bit better. Not sure what yet. Could be something along the realms of like Arrow for Arc and Lugia, or you can play Kyogre for Arc and Lugia. I'm still going to play around with it, but the core of this deck is really, really good. You should definitely play it if you're playing locals, or if you're playing Worlds, you should definitely test it 100%. And that's pretty much it.
All right, well, you can follow Victor on Twitter here at It's Vic. I will leave the link to his Twitter in the description down below. Is there any other social media you want people to find you at?
The Twitter is the main one. I will have my YouTube link there and my profile as well. I don't know if it is currently, but I'm going to add it. And there are some content pieces. I haven't made stuff in a while, but we'll continue to do so. I'll be uploading stuff from Cardboard Clash. I was actually in Chicago this past weekend doing Cardboard Clash, casting that, and that was a blast. So I'm going to upload some highlights of me casting that event and me interviewing at that event. If you need me to cast your event, whether it be online or in person, definitely reach out, because my dream is to eventually be a caster one day.
And there's no one better than the guy that just got top 8 at the largest tournament of all time. So please hit up Victor. You know, he's very well spoken and he knows the game better than almost anyone on the planet. So please reach out. He's a great guy, great talent, and thank you for doing this interview with me, man. I appreciate you, and I'm really happy to see your growth as a player over these last couple of years. You know, from being the Nagquag guy to getting top 8 in the largest tournament in history.
Thank you.
Right, well, thank you guys for watching. If you guys made it to this far in the video, you know, give me a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I definitely will have Victor back, and, you know, maybe he'll have me. You'll see me on his channel or something. So,
Sounds
thank you guys
good.
for watching.
See ya.